Hey everyone, welcome back to But Why the Reviews. And today we are talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And I keep wanting to say Kingdom of the Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and that's not correct. I'm Kate, and I'm here with Prob
Hey,
and Raphael.
Hello.
Prob, why don't you give everybody a quick intro for yourself?
yeah, my name's Prabjot Bans, and I'm just a freelance critic columnist. I write for a bunch of places, including But Why Though, and also Range Magazine, Hollywood Handle, Our Culture Mag, Exclaim. So a bunch of places. You can catch me at a bunch of places for sure.
And Raphael, give them your intro too.
Yeah, so I work for a bunch of places, whatever people want to pay me to write about movies and do silly things. Slash Film, IndieWire, IGN, and occasionally But Why Though, including this podcast.
Yes, if people have watched our like last three or four, Raphael may be on all of them.
I am
Um,
forcing my way into this podcast.
and we are going to start with a synopsis of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. The new Apes movie is set many years after the conclusion of 2017's. No, I'm not going to read that one. I had to IMDb this because the one that PR sent was just filled with like all of the names they could jam into it. So we're gonna roll with whatever Pedro Borges wrote on IMDb. Set several generations in the future following Caesar's reign, in which apes are the dominant species living harmoniously and humans have been reduced to living in the shadows. A new tyrannical ape leader builds his empire, and one young ape undertakes a harrowing journey that will cause him to question all that he has known about the past and to make choices that will define a future for apes and humans alike. Guys, what were your expectations for this film? And we can start with Prob.
Yeah, okay. I was caught between two camps because personally, like I loved Dawn and War. Like those movies, I really, really thought they had no right being as good as they did, and I think I kind of look at them as like prestige blockbuster where they're actually caring about the arcs of characters more than the actual spectacle. But at the same time, I'm like, this movie is so unnecessary, right? Like Hollywood has this huge problem with finality. Just when we think a story couldn't end more perfectly, like it did with Dawn and War,
Mhm.
and the industry always has to resuscitate it to kind of like the point of irrelevance, which is kind of
Yep.
what happened to Apes in the 70s. And yeah, like it gave us one of the most complete, satisfying arcs, like in recent memory. And then just building upon Caesar's story kind of feels like not only a daunting task, but really an unnecessary one. So I was mixed. Like I was excited but very trepidatious, really realizing that it's really an unnecessary story on my end.
Mm. Raphael, what about you?
I was pure purely excited about it.
You're
The
just like
Apes
apes.
franchise. I mean, for me, this is like the most consistent franchise in Hollywood history. Uh, like yes, is any and every sequel since the 1968 original unnecessary? Yes, and yet every single one from the canon has been so bonkers and good that has justified its existence in some random way by just being weird. I did not mind what they were gonna do with it. I just knew that if it added at least some kind of weirdness, it would be worth it. From Battle of the Planet of the Apes to Beneath the
I
Planet of
was
the Apes
gonna
is
ask
to
you,
my
did you
name.
count the ground one in this?
Yes, that is to me the
You
best
count you count
random
the
way
Tim
you.
Burton reboot? You count the
No,
Tim
no.
Burton?
I'm saying the canon
Okay.
ones. I'm saying like the
Okay,
first
okay.
five and then
That's
That's the
this.
fair.
one.
I can take this. That's fair.
Beneath the Planet of the Apes is one of the boldest and coolest things you could possibly do with a sequel. And that set a very high standard that I think like they've been matching over and over again for years. So after the reboot just went ahead and did like a complete like pivot to like being grounded and cool. Like yes, I agree. War of the Planet of the Apes has a perfect ending, but we are still like really far away from grounded apes and drama to mutant humans living on the ground who are telepaths and also worship a giant bomb. And I wanna see that pivot. I wanna go from grounded sci-fi drama to whimsical random stuff with like time traveling and all of that shit. I wanna see that.
This is
I want to
amazing.
see it turn into a musical at the fourth part, though.
And
Yes.
eventually turn into a musical. Yes.
Yes, yes,
If
yes.
Alan Wake taught us anything, it's that add a musical. It can
I
make it better.
I thought about that musical several times during this movie.
I was more trepidatious like prom and was like the Caesar trilogy is really good. So my dad is like you, Raphael, and believes that Planet of the Apes outside of Tim Burton can do no wrong and is in love with it, and he indoctrinated me into that camp, although I do not love it like he does, and I don't remember half the ones that I watched from the 70s. But I remember watching Caesar's trilogy, and I think Dawn, especially to your point, Prob, about it being like that prestige level of blockbuster. I think that that was one of, I mean, not counting James Cameron's Avatar, which I think is very different because those aren't real life forms that you're watching in mocap.
How
I
dare
think
you?
that this was one of those first times where I saw circuses like full dynamic talent as a choreographer, as a full-bodied actor, as and I think that that was where I saw the life in it and I fell in love with it. But I like Hollywood just won't let things die. Like they just need to keep doing something with it. And so I went into the movie thinking at best it will be mid. That was my expectation. Because I was just like, it'll be pretty good. And like, am I just gonna be thinking about Andy Serkis the entire time? That's what I thought was gonna happen. Now we get into talking about the movie itself, and that didn't happen for me. I really liked it. I vibed with it really well. We can go around and talk about like at least like one of the good things each of us had, and that to start it off, I think that it handled Caesar's legacy really well in that it never felt like there was a true shadow of the Caesar trilogy over it, but rather an understanding about how stories and histories change over time and how they're told. And so I think that it was able to start with Caesar, have Caesar's name being used in different ways and inform the story without making me constantly think about the last trilogy. And I think that that was a hurdle it needed to clear to kind of start off fresh and new. And I think that it did that for me. Prob, what about you? What was something that you really liked about it?
I love how it actually my favorite part about it, and it's interesting. Like I'd walked out of the press screening, and one critic told me that he expected more from it, and he thought it was kind of underwhelming. Where I, on the other hand, I liked that it didn't try to be this big, huge type of spectacle movie, right? It really isn't paced like or structured like a blockbuster movie. It
Yeah.
really takes its time with the characters, and I think that's I think what it does best, right? It takes us through each relationship, each motivation, each moment of quiet personal growth. And like you said, that realization of how stories evolve over time, right? And each character is never rendered like a monolith, right? From,
Yeah.
how from Noah, right? The protagonist, how noble he is, from like his intimidating foil in, Proximus Caesar, the quote unquote villain, each person is capable of both kindness, cruelty, strength and cowardice. Like I was surprised, especially how Proximus Caesar really wasn't like that kind of stereotypical villain. He kind of
Mhm.
really is kind of like the 300-year generation monologue analog, sorry, to Koba, right? He's complex. He's, he doesn't hate
Yeah.
Noah. He's like, hey, come join us. Like, look, this is what I'm trying to do. It has pushed us into the kind of age of where humans left off at, right? And he wasn't needlessly cruel, but when it came to it, he could be. So I thought that was really the interesting part of the film, its commitment to character. And then again, another favorite part I liked about it, sorry, jumping, but um the motion capture, like you mentioned, right? Like usually motion capture, the effects are used in a way to kind of prop up the spectacle. Here it's really used to prop up the characters, right? The vast array of emotions that come off of it. That really helped how the story is really committed to its character writing. So that was my favorite part of it.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
I agree. Rafael, what
Yeah,
about you?
building up of what both of you said, I love both. I love the villain. Well, I love Proximus. I really like the way he felt like both the movie getting closer to the timeline of the originals without fully going to like, yeah, no, apes are evil now because they're the ones in power and we are supporting the one human who's trying to like do human stuff. Like, no, humans are still bad, very bad. We don't trust humans. But and I like the way they handle like anytime Kevin Durant is on screen, I will watch it. Anytime he's playing an attack, I will watch it. He's just great. Um, and I like that he like Proximos as a villain is really fun to watch. He's kind of weird. He gave me that sort of like sci-fi weirdness vibes from the 70s movies.
Yeah.
Like his plan, like his actual goal when he says it, I was like, oh yes, please. I beg you, give it to me somehow. In another movie, do it. Let him be
I,
right.
The
I
way
And
was
I
he's
siding
would
with them
love to
too.
see
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I was siding with them too, kind of. I was like, it makes sense. That makes sense.
The very
Yeah.
specifically the line delivery on the word evolution. That is what did it to me. I was like, he's the right amount of eccentric and intimidating. Like it was
Yeah,
hands
the when he
down.
goes
And
like
yeah,
evolution.
Yes, Evo.
yeah. And speaking of that, one thing I really liked about this movie, just the evolution of the way the apes talk, and just going from having rewatched the season trilogy recently, and seeing especially in the opening like minutes, like the first like 20 minutes when it's just the three apes together,
Mhm.
having them be bilingual and going from now everyone, all
Yeah,
of the apes speak English normally, but they still switch between English and sign language and just like ape talk whenever.
yeah.
Uh, like willingly was really cool and powerful to see, because before like we knew like Maurice spoke English, he just didn't want to. He did it like
He
for
was
like
Bad Bunny.
in powerful moments. Yeah. And it was just Caesar who did it because he was the one that like kind of bridged the
Yeah.
gap between like apes and humans, because he was weird. But now that they're like the dominant species, but they still haven't like abandoned those roots and stuff.
Mhm.
I thought that was really cool to see, and I kind of wish they'd done more with that. But I understand like plot wise why they didn't. But it's still like very cool to see that not being forgotten in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what Kate was saying before, like how it's saying that the translation of knowledge throughout time. I think actually the act of sign language I think was lost among certain civilizations, right? They couldn't even know sign language. I think when he first meets Raka, right, the wise orangutan. I think that's the trope now. Every orangutan is the wise person in these movies.
Oh
They're
yeah,
all
no,
type
that
they're
that's
Yes,
all
always that's
typecast.
from like the 60s.
100%.
The 61 literally had a cast system where the orangutans were always the wise ones, and the politicians, the gorillas are always the brutes, and the
The
chimpanzees are
longer the arms, the larger the
the regular
brain.
ones.
There you go. There you go. But
Damn,
yeah, like
yeah.
yeah, but in that scene when he meets him, right? Like he's trying to sign language thing. He's like, speak up. And I thought in that moment, it's
Yeah,
like
no, you're right. Yeah.
I don't think he understood sign language, right? Like
Yeah.
I think some characters did. Like it's just the loss of communication, right?
No,
And it's even with human history, how much we've lost over time, right? And we have to
yes.
relearn. So
Well, and
yeah,
especially because there's no formal writing, which it establishes that that's not what they're doing. So Caesar's myth, Caesar's legend is either lost completely, like to the Eagle clan, or is warped in a way by Maximus. And you kind of have Raqqa as that last bastion of like Caesar's memory and the original laws, and like what happens when that diverges. And I think both of you are really right in like the ways in which what gets preserved, what doesn't get preserved. And I think more what that does is it builds a really rich world to live in. Like as much as the characters are really well developed, like you said, Prob, the world where like Raphael, like we can see like the quick evolution happening or evolution happening later on to get to the weirdness. Like it is rich and it is deep and it is layered. And I think that what I really liked too is how the Eagle clan talked about humans. Like I loved that they called them echoes. Like I thought that was really interesting to
Yeah.
see how they interacted with them. And I think that it's hard, and I think that is the thing that like a lot of sci-fi stories kind of struggle with, is making different clans feel distinct and their own within a larger world reacting to the same thing. And I think that this did it really well, surprisingly. um and honestly, like come on, like, and I guess it's like the natural trajectory of Planet of the Apes, but like the fact that if they're evolving, they're going to end up on the human trajectory of just being terrible colonial like institutions that will enslave other people, or apes in this sense. Like, um, was there anything else that y'all found really striking? I think for me it was kind of the small notes, actually, like as much as it were the big set pieces like at Proximus's kingdom. I also think it was like the small thing of like having them wear face paint very specifically if they had bought into the Caesar religion, or the little satchels that they had when they were with the eagles. Like I thought that like those are little costuming moments that I think we expect from full live action movies, and to see that care given to something that's all mocap, I think is something that, I don't know, it's just very thoughtful, and it goes back to that rich layering of culture within the
Yeah,
movie.
and yeah, like it goes back to what I was kind of saying before. It was like where this movie, and like Raphael pointed out, the rest of the franchise, all of it's unnecessary. Each edition is so unnecessary, but all of them tap into, I mean, at least the good ones, especially this one,
Yes.
tap into what makes them so good, right? It's their timeless commentary
Yeah.
on our penchant for self-destruction, our inability, our tendencies, our worst foibles, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's the strongest part it does, right? It shines a mirror back at us. And I think it asks, like, will these tendencies lead us to salvation, or will it destroy us? And one question asked is, who is this world really for? Like is
Yeah.
it for humans? Is it for apes? I mean, are we all one and the same? And it really paints a picture as to what's the conversations we have now amongst ourselves. And I think
Hmm.
that's the strongest element. It doesn't forget that part of itself. And I think, yeah, it's a necessary, didn't need to happen, but hey, I still friggin' loved it. Like
Yeah.
it still did exactly what I wanted it to do. So
Yeah, to your point, one thing that really struck me was avoiding spoilers as much as I can, but like the movie really gave me the vibes of I Am Legend, not the Will Smith movie, the original, like the actual
Mhm.
story, where like the point we just humans realizing, or like the idea of this is not a world anymore,
Yeah.
and the thought that we are passing on to legend. Here is not only humans who are now becoming legend to the point where like like they don't even, like, they can't even think of a world when humans used to speak, let
Hmm.
alone be the dominant species, but just Caesar himself. And it's something that, Pratt, to your point of like, yes, like as I was saying before, like every movie does something new and unique. I think, like as I was saying before, like the idea of Caesar's legacy, and specific, and not even just Caesar's legacy, but just the keeping of knowledge in this way, and what is lost and what is repeated and what is morphed through the ages is something that we haven't really seen before in these movies.
Hmm.
Um, because even within the original one, like once they went back in time and started like telling the story of Caesar, it was within a relatively short amount of time. So Caesar's like legacy was still very much alive. But here is the first time that we see like, okay, it's been like we don't know how many years. The whole I like the whole generations thing because it's a tricky way, because like apes don't live that long. So it could be like many generations of apes, could be like 100 years, and it's not that much for us, but it's a lot for them. And it is enough where like the Eagle Clan has no idea who Caesar is.
Yeah.
They don't even know. And we don't know how many other clans there are. And I like that, the fact that we went from just like the one thing about the tree that I didn't like, because I would have liked to see more of is like, where are the other apes? There has to be more apes.
Yeah.
Like at one point in War, they encounter another, like, "Ah, there must be some other apes in the planet. Like they don't even know
Yeah.
there are more apes on the planet. Like at least I don't know how long, like the journey was relatively long, and I hope we get to see more like communities somewhere else. But the fact that just this movie alone shows like, okay, no, enough time has passed that there are multiple clans and kingdoms or whatever, each of them with a different perspective on history, getting them closer to like human society, where we're like different
Yeah.
cultures and whatever. I think that's a really cool, like a world building point that this movie does that none of the other ones did. That makes me excited to see what else they can do with that idea.
Yeah. Because it is actually a planet of apes and not just one
Yeah,
ape clan going,
yeah.
Now, do you guys think, I mean, avoiding spoilers, like the way the story concludes, do you think moving forward, they're gonna focus on these same characters, or are we gonna get another
I,
story?
to be honest, I would love for them to just give us another like a different story. And I think that they've
Exactly,
set it up
yeah.
I
to make
hope
that.
I hope they keep jumping forward in time. Like I want him to.
Yeah.
This was we talked about it. I talked about it with people at work. Like, is the plan? And I wouldn't mind this. Like remake the original because at this point,
Yeah.
like again, keeping with the
And then
spirit of everything goes from the original
Yeah.
movie, you could remake it based on the timeline and the tone of these ones. When it's slightly more grounded, at this point, we know it's the Planet of the Apes. The way things went down was different than before. So maybe it's not like 1,500 years in the future. Maybe it's a shorter amount of time. And we know the astronauts are out there from Rise of the Planet of the Apes. When they say that like the spaceship, like whatever was
Yeah.
lost, they could get to that point. So I my biggest wish is just to keep jumping forward until we're getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
eventually Taylor crashes back on it.
I think to
yeah,
what
and
Prob said earlier, I need them to if their goal is to meet the original where it's at or to start remaking the beginning, I need them to not take 9 more films to do it. I need
Oh
them
yeah.
to just I, I want it to be a concise and cohesive trilogy with a vision in mind for where it's going.
yeah. And then
That's what
since
I need it to be.
yeah, and then since Timothy Chalamet gets cast and everything, he's gonna play Charlton
Yeah.
Heston. So
Yeah.
we already know. We
Calling
already
it
know it's
now.
happening. I'm calling it. I'm calling it. I'm waiting
Oh.
for that. The Dune line. You damn dirty apes. That line. I
Use the
can't wait
voice.
for it.
I just like that your hair is nice and fluffed to deliver that line like that.
Oh yeah, there you
Just
go.
like little Timmy. So we've talked a lot about things that we really liked. Is there anything that y'all would have improved? I don't know if I'm the best to critique here because I had a terrible promo screening experience in where the entire first act and the emotional moments that happened there was coupled with a woman who was talking to her son and husband about everything that was on screen.
I get it.
And it was
Man.
yeah.
Sally soundtrack.
Yeah. So I didn't pay for her commentary or or the others. So I feel a little weird because I think some of the moments that I wanted more from in the third act would have paid off more had I been able to watch the first act uninterrupted. So I'm going to reserve some of my last act criticisms for when I rewatch the film in
Hmm.
the comfort of my own home without somebody in my ear. So I'll throw it to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God, that was a crazy voice crack. I've been watching a lot of hockey playoffs. Sorry, my voice is gone. But yeah, in terms of yeah, criticism, again, it goes to, is this story big enough? Like, did it go to the length of spectacle that people kind of expect it to go to? Because really, if you look at it like structure wise, it's very simple. In terms of
Mhm.
overall the beats that it follows on a structure, nothing's really wild, nothing's really surprising. But what its big spectacle is never gargantuan. It's big, but it's modest in terms of blockbuster length. So when I talk to other critics, they're saying it didn't go far enough. It makes it really less memorable. I think depending on who views it, I mean, your enjoyment of it will depend on how invested you are in the characters, right? Because the
Mhm.
film really is leaning on big emotions, big arcs, underpinning and propelling the spectacle that it has, right? And so, I think if you're looking for or you're expecting, big combat, big moments, I mean, that's not really there. I think where the movie really shines is in its characterizations, the characters that undergo, and then the kind of
Mhm.
solemnly beautiful kind of post-apocalyptic world it creates. It kind of luxuriates in it, right? You have the kind of like the
Yeah.
rusty coastal kingdom of Proximus, and then you have giving it way to like the rusted kind of ruin verdant kind of cityscapes, right? And it allows you to soak it in rather than kind of soar through it. It lets you to kind of nestle into it. So if you're okay with the glacial pace, then I think you'll enjoy it. But if you're expecting something else, like Vin Diesel popping up and saying family and running, then I don't know.
Rafael, what about you?
So I think my quote unquote issues have more to do with I want to see what the plan is,
That's
because
fair.
a lot of it is maybe it's part of the plan, but regardless, like as a standalone movie, I do think there's a little bit for me, a little bit of an issue of I've seen this before with a new coat of paint on it.
Mm,
In that, oh yeah, it's another movie where the ape has to go rescue his clan from a maniacal like tyrant who like captures them and puts them in a cage or puts them to work. We've seen this before in War and in Dawn. Um, Part of the problem with like the very undefined many generations later is that there are some aspects that I can't specify that do seem kind of very pretty much the same as it was in the last movie.
hmm
In that, like, there are some things where it's obvious that a long time has passed, and other one like this doesn't look like, and they like characters are not acting like that much time has passed.
hmm
And some characters are remembering like or like acting like they remember a lot when they shouldn't be. So with that, is mostly are we gonna just repeat the same things from the previous movies,
hmm
but just now it's different because now there are even more apes. I don't know about that. But like I heard Wes Ball say like he doesn't want to rehash anything. I hope that doesn't mean he doesn't want to rehash the original movies, because I want to see him rehashing the original movies. Specifically by remaking them, specifically by eventually bringing us telepathic mutants that are living on the ground in the ruins of New York City. But it does mean that, like, for a big, like a relatively big show, a decent amount of time in this movie, I was like, well, I don't know what they mean to do with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also have a
And I don't
question.
like, I don't like thinking about like what the next movies are. But I think we all been burned by the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and thinking, oh, where are they gonna go with this, and realizing, oh, they weren't, they were not gonna. So that's my thing. I want to know. I hope they make a new. I hope they make another one, and I hope to find out like what the plan was, if there was a plan.
Yeah, I have a question for you. Do you think that a lot of the world that it shows is left very vague, right? Like a
hmm
lot of, I mean, there's no correlation, there's no mention of like Caesar's family, the monarchy or how it
Yeah.
progressed, right? Like, is there a central family monarchy somewhere? Like, is it created? Is it that kingdom, the real true kingdom still somewhere? And these are just offshoots? Like, we don't know, right? Because you would assume that, if Caesar was such a heralded, revered figure,
Yeah.
and you had Maurice who said at the end of war, "I'll make sure your son knows who his father was," right? And that kind of extends
Hey,
to the
he
world.
didn't promise the other apes will know who
Yes,
Caesar was.
yeah, that's true. That's true. It died with was it Cornelius? It died
Yeah.
Yeah,
Family Caesar's just in a little hut somewhere, like with their own
yeah,
clan. My
yeah, he
dad was
messed
who?
up. He messed up. He didn't tell his wife, he didn't tell his kids, he told his dad.
Just the son.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But do you think you wish it went there, or you think that's a topic for the other movies if the or are you
I don't mind if they just leave it as it is here. I would
Mhm.
like to see some version, like now that you mentioned, like, oh, there being like the quote unquote real kingdom. That would be cool.
Yeah.
But I like the idea, like going back to like what Kate said at the very beginning, just the idea of we are beyond Caesar's legacy. In that, like in the arena, like in the very first movie, like the idea of the ape that like led like all the apes to like Caesar was a myth. Like not even a myth, it was for forbidden knowledge.
hmm
And I do like that we are speeding up through that point. In that, I mean, it makes sense. Like once the leader dies, they just like fragment, and like everyone spreads into like their own little like kingdoms or whatever, and they all make their own version of I am the lawgiver now, or whatever they want to do.
hmm
Because one thing I really like about this movie, they point out like maybe some of Caesar's ideas were maybe outdated. Some of Caesar's like let's love humans and live in peace with them. Maybe not. Maybe don't do that.
Yeah.
So I don't mind them just like kind of ignoring the idea of Caesar just because the apes themselves want to just like make their own laws and just I like that we're getting to the point where like he faces onto myth like it was in the arenas and nobody even knows if it was a real ape
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, I would like to see it because I think that it is so paramount to like where things are and we see it kind of living in other people. But I do wonder if they go the route of not showing like the family, because like I do think you're right, like they do pretty much set it up to be a monarchy of like what's like of everything. And I think it would be cool if there was like a real kingdom. And all of these are just kind of offshoots that developed on their own. Because ultimately, if there is a monastic order devoted to Caesar's teaching, one would assume that they were leaving a kingdom to go spread the word of Caesar to other people.
That's true.
So I think it's in there. I think that like one of the interesting things about the film is it literally can go anywhere. And I think that that is both a good thing and it can be a bad thing if there isn't a defined path. So I'm kind of like, I would like to see it because I think Raqa's existence justifies that there would be a larger order or at least a larger proper kingdom of Caesar, because there's no other reason to be a monastic order
That's
trying
true.
to live in the way of Caesar if there wasn't some place where that was there. And he's also like a little evangelizing, which I think is pretty pertinent. um but at the same time I worry that if you reflect too much on probably one of the better modern trilogies that exists, you can be swallowed by it.
The
And
Phantom
I
Menace.
yeah. Yeah. And I
I
think
mean,
that is something that, because they're not that far behind. Like there isn't
no.
enough breathing room, and it is really hard to do that. Like to do a new trilogy and follow up something that was really good. And I think that they kind of need to, I don't know. I think it can get messy.
See, now that you're thinking about like now that you're talking about it, I don't know. I wouldn't mind them like I don't mind them like reflecting on the thriller and like this is just like wild speculation. It has nothing to do with this movie, but just the idea of as we're talking about the idea of there being a kingdom where like the quote unquote like the actual like Caesar's legacy is still alive and thriving.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a bad idea of them like just continuing to repeat that like who is Caesar so many years removed? Like who is Caesar when like humans are still around? Who is Caesar when the humans are dying off? Who is Caesar when there are no humans?
Yeah.
And there's no need for like apes together strong because like they're like what like they're there. They're the
Yeah.
only people like whatever. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind necessarily them like continuing to interrogate those ideas because it connects to eventually get to the point where like apes are humans now.
Yeah.
And Caesar doesn't matter, doesn't see like they don't it's forbidden knowledge, just that it's the forbidden city, and they know like this was once the planet of humans.
Yeah.
Um I wouldn't necessarily mind that. I do like the fact that I think this movie is sort of, which makes sense, sort of the Force Awakens effect of we need to echo what came before enough so people when I want to see that again, come see this movie, but also really vague enough to be like they can do whatever they want with this, as they did in the originals. They can go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like again, they keep it like the story is very simple in a good way, really like quote unquote standard like coming of age story boy who finds out there's a bigger world and things suck, so he just want to go home. Uh, I do like that, and I think like that gives them like a lot of possibilities to go. It's just that for me, that vagueness and the fact that a lot of what they touch on and reference from previous movies felt a little bit too similar for the time frame that they're having. And
Yeah.
I worry that they're just eventually gonna sort of echo things that we already seen before and not be different enough to connect to be a proper like stand alone trilogy that bridges two, but rather just mash these 6 movies together and then a big gap before the original.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah. So now to wrap, would you all tell people to go watch this? And what's your numerical score that you would assign it? We'll start with Prob.
Yeah, definitely go see it in the theaters. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would definitely recommend. It's a great theater going experience. Again, note that it's not going to be the big explosion-y kind of movie that you expect it to be, but yeah, I'd give it definitely a recommend in the theaters. And then in terms of a score, solid movie. It definitely does not reach the heights of the
Yeah.
Matt Reeves directed Dawn and War, but it's a solid movie. I'd place it somewhere close to an 8 out of 10 for
Yeah.
me. And then yeah, and also one last thought, and we could touch on it later, but I also found out that he's directing the Legend of the Zelda movie. Got big vibes. Get big vibes from this movie. I don't play the games. My girlfriend is obsessed with that game on Switch, but of the forests and everything, I mean, I don't know. He could be a good
The
fit.
vibes are there. The
The
vibes are there.
vibes. He passes the vibe check. Raphael.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, no doubt about it. 8 out of 10, apes together strong, all of that stuff. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Rachel, you got to do it too. You got to do it too. All of us
Yeah.
together. Come on. No, get it.
Also,
Um,
I love that they're still so many movies later they're still using the damn window from don't you forget James Franco's house from Rise of the Planet of the Apes as their symbol. Their symbol is the house that James Franco used to live in.
They're gonna pull a George Lucas, and then now when you watch the '68 movie, they're gonna like digitally put that
Oh
thing in
my
the first movie.
God.
They're gonna George Lucas it. Watch it.
Sir.
Yeah.
I also believe everybody should watch this movie. I don't think it hits the heights of the Caesar trilogy, but I think the road is there. The road is there to hit it. I think it's kind of like their game to lose. I think that it's a real good movie. I loved the Maze Runner movies personally, so I think that this was something that like I really needed. And I think yeah, it sucks because like I don't know where to score it because the first act was ruined for me. But I'm gonna give it just for the third act alone, like a solid 8 out of 10 with y'all. Because the finale, the final moments of that movie are great. And it's also why I'm scared of birds, and that's all I will say. Prob, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram at my name 96, Band 96, and you'll find me talking about movies and how Timothy Chalamet gets cast and everything. Yeah, basically.
Raphael, what about you?
You can find me on socials at Rafael Montemayor and check out my writing. I just post my writing on my Twitter. Check out I did a profile on D. Bradley Baker and his work on Clone Wars and Bad Batch at the New York Times.
And y'all can find me at OMMithrander on Twitter, and you can read our review of this movie on butwhythough.net, and you can read all of my writing over at butwhythough.net as well. Thank y'all for watching, and I guess, what is it? Is it this? James Franco's window?
Yes, apes together strong.
Apes together
Apes together.
strong in James
Apes together.
Franco's house. Goodbye.
Oh no.